Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Modern Web Development Trends at Enterprise Scale. Netlify is the platform teams love for building highly performant and dynamic digital experiences, websites, e-commerce stores, and web applications. By uniting an extensive ecosystem of technologies, services, and APIs into one workflow, Netlify helps teams unlock new levels of productivity that helps to save your organization both time and money. So what does Netlify look like by the numbers? Netlify is a global organization founded in 2014 in San Francisco. Roughly 16% of the internet population visits a web property on Netlify each month, which is where the data we're going to show today is derived from. And over 3 million developers and businesses use Netlify to help them ship faster and build better digital experiences. And now I'm going to turn it over to Laurie to walk us through the trends.
Thanks, Kat. So really pleased to be here. Netlify has a ton of data from watching millions of developers build sites every day. So let's dive in and see what sites ship fastest and how they do that. Specifically today, we're going to be focusing on how to maximize your build speed. So let's start with the most basic fact, which is as sites get bigger, they get slower to build. At Netlify, we see billions of builds every month, and we know exactly how big each site is. You can see here we're splitting up the builds by the tier that they're on. Free sites are the smallest, pro sites are bigger, and enterprise sites are biggest on average. That's a distribution, not a hard rule. You can see some very tiny enterprise sites and also some very big free sites. These increasingly big sites show up as slower builds at the same tiers. This happens despite having features that make builds faster at higher tiers, like high performance builds and more concurrent builds. For those not familiar, I should explain those tiers a little bit. Our free tier is for hobbyists, usually people working alone. They get a global CDN and instant deploys. At the pro tier, you get support for organizations and lots of collaboration tools to work in a team. And at the enterprise tier, you get security features, SLAs, premium support, all sorts of stuff. Including the option to pay for faster builds and a faster CDN. You might be tempted to think that this is just about the size of the company. After all, aren't enterprise companies going to be bigger than small businesses and hobbyists? On the contrary, what we see is that the distribution of site sizes at each company size is roughly the same. So small companies have roughly the same distribution of big or small sites as big companies do. Except for that weird outlier in the 500 to 1,000 category. So the size of your company is not a good predictor of the size of your website. Why might that be? We'll dig further into that question a bit later, but one possibility is that the very largest companies are going for more dynamic sites. Dynamic sites build fewer pages up front. Whatever the reason, it means that the very biggest companies are on average building quite a lot faster than companies smaller than they are, which is what this chart shows. The really big fish have figured something out. So let's figure out what that is. Regardless of company size, we're able to identify the sites that have the shortest build times. But we can do better than that because some of those sites might have short build times just because they're small websites. So let's use a metric that accounts for that. Let's take the total number of files in a site and divide that by the build time to get a metric of files per second. This properly compares apples to apples in terms of build speed, regardless of how big the site actually is. So let's look at how sites on Netlify break down by this metric of files per second. Looking at all Netlify sites and grouping them by files per second, you can see that there's a bunch of sites on the left that build pretty slowly, just less than 0.5 files per second. But over on the right, there's a big group who build really fast, more than 10 files per second. Now, this is not a perfect metric because some sites, as I said, may be dynamic and thus build a few complex pages quite slowly. That's probably what a lot of the sites in the first bar are doing. While others are static sites who have tons and tons of very simple pages that they're building very quickly. And those are going to be clustered in that last bar. So that's why we see this bimodal distribution. Nevertheless, it's a good way to look at the data. So let's find out how these sites are different. And let's first look at what frameworks they're using. Netlify prides itself on being framework agnostic. Whatever framework you pick, we have performance and DevX enhancements in place that will make it easy to work with and faster to build than if you were building it yourself or on your own hardware. The result is that there are more than 50 frameworks in active use on Netlify, and we track their usage in builds across our millions and millions of sites. What you're looking at here is a somewhat unusual visualization. If you're familiar with GitHub's Octoverse, they do a chart like this for programming language popularity, but I need to explain it carefully. What we've done here is we've split all the sites up into 4 groups: slow, moderate, fast, and very fast builds. So sites are getting faster as you go left to right. We then looked at what the most popular frameworks were in each of those groups. So we're not measuring speed of framework per se here, because how would you even measure that? What we're measuring is popularity within sites by how fast they are. This prevents us finding some obscure but extremely fast framework. This is real world usage. This is not artificial benchmarks. This is what people really use when they are building very fast. We found some clear trends. You can see static site generators like Hugo, Zola, and Jekyll are clearly getting more popular towards the fast end of the graph. Next.js, which is more app focused, does less well, and it gets overtaken by Gatsby, which also has a focus on fast builds. So clearly, if you have a ton of pages to build, then static site generators work really well, and frameworks that are more app focused become less popular. Another thing that we pride ourselves on here at Netlify is our ability to work with whatever CMS that you bring. Organizations have a lot of factors that come into play when they pick a CMS. So we never want our compatibility to be a blocker. And compatibility is one of the hallmarks of the composable architecture that we love. So we partner with every CMS vendor that you can think of to make sure our customers get a great experience. Given all of that, it occurred to us to ask, does the CMS that you use affect the speed of your site build? It's a good question, and the answer seems to be not very much, or at least not enough to affect the popularity of various CMS as sites get bigger and faster. This is the same kind of graph as the one we just showed before, but you can see that the lines are mostly flat. Contentful and Sanity start off being the most popular CMS, and they're still the most popular CMS at the far end. And that's good news because everybody hates changing their CMS. And if you had to do that to get faster performance, that would be really annoying. But as I mentioned earlier, the metric that we've been looking at so far favors static sites. They have lots of simple pages and they can build them very fast. Can we look at dynamic sites and see how they ship faster? It turns out that we can't. Finding dynamic sites is quite tricky, but we found a way by looking at serverless functions. There's lots of use cases for serverless functions, like async data processing, background functions, and personalization that have nothing to do with being a dynamic site. So to make sure that we were looking at just dynamic sites, we narrowed our search to a framework that we know really well, Gatsby. And we looked at build times between heavy and light users of serverless functions. What you see here is that 35% of light functions users experience builds that we consider to be slow, but that number drops to 22% among users we see making heavy use of functions. So to us, this suggests that significantly dynamic sites are seeing build time improvements because they don't have to build all of their pages in advance. Of course, not every dynamic site is a Gatsby site. Next.js is the most popular framework in the world right now. And their approach to lowering build times, their approach to dynamic sites is called incremental static regeneration, or ISR. As I mentioned earlier, we are framework agnostic. So ISR works great on Netlify as well. And the core of both approaches is that you build the core of your site at deploy time, just the core, and your remaining pages are rendered the first time that they are requested, and then they are cached forever or until your next deploy. Another great way to reduce build time is to build static pages very quickly at deploy time and then modify them at the edge. You can personalize, localize, or enhance them according to the user. The way you do that is by using Netlify's edge functions. We call that functionality edge side rendering, or ESR. If all of these 3-letter acronyms, ISR, ESR, SSR, have they got you down, then the blog post linked on this slide has a great explanation to get them straight for you. Edge functions provide a lot of ways to bring dynamism to a site without sacrificing your build times or your end user experience. We support content includes, custom HTTP request headers, localization via geolocation, and more stuff. So here's the takeaways. There's two big strategies for shipping fast at scale, for building fast, that we see in our data, and Netlify is great at both of them. The first is to do everything upfront really, really fast. Use a static site generator and build your entire site at build time. The second is to do everything later. Use a serverless framework that lets you ship a build quickly and render pages when you need them. And of course, there's always a middle ground. The middle ground in this case is edge-side rendering, where you mostly render things in advance, but use edge-side rendering to do the final touches. How do you decide which of those is best for you? There's a lot of factors, including the complexity of your site, your familiarity with these various tools, and the size and makeup of your team. But all other things being equal, the deciding factor might be your hit rate. Do you need everything on your site to get read every single time you deploy? Is your first hit speed vital for SEO purposes? Is a particularly good decision point. Then you should consider a static site where everything is going to be ready immediately and your very first hit is going to be as fast as your 100th hit. If not, then you might want to consider dynamic sites. And of course, there's always that middle ground of ESR. And with that, I will hand it back to Kat.
Thank you so much, Laurie, for those great insights. So now that you've seen the breakdown of the trends, where can you find out more? Well, here's a cool fact for you. So using the same data that Laurie walked us through in this presentation, we actually created a quiz where you can find on the homepage of netlify.com. So by answering a few brief questions, you can figure out where you stack up against other teams like yours shipping on Netlify. Now, if you're looking to level up your web development strategy, we also have a free ebook available called Better, Faster, Future-Proof: 3 Keys to Shipping Standout Digital Experiences. And with that, we're going to open it up for questions. So please do drop your questions in the Q&A box, and we are going to go ahead and get started. So Laurie, first question for you. What is the main advantage of using edge functions?
Well, I suppose it depends what you're comparing it to. The main advantage of using edge functions over a static site, obviously, is going to be dynamism. You're going to be able to do last minute, extremely fast changes to the content of your site. So I mentioned content includes. Those are really great for static sites. You can have a site that's, imagine the New York Times. Every article on the New York Times is going to look roughly the same, but it has a little box in the top right that says you are logged in or you are not logged in. You can render, 99% of the page in advance and just do that little box on the edge really, really fast. So that's one of the ways that you can use edge functions, but there's a lot of other ways that you can do that.
Awesome. And where can our listeners go to find out more about edge functions?
Well, and Netlify has a lot of pages about edge functions. Do we have a link to the specific page there?
I'm sure we can grab it for our listeners. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next question. So how can I improve my build speed on my site?
Well, that's a great question. The way to get faster, the most reliable way to get faster is always to do less stuff. So if you are experiencing extremely long build times, if you have hundreds of thousands of pages and your builds are really slow, then you might want to consider a dynamic site. If you're doing something like e-commerce where you have 1 page per item in your inventory, then a dynamic site that only renders each page if and when they get hit is often going to be a really great strategy. On the other hand, like I said, if you have, if SEO is top of mind for you and you are trying to, attract search engines and indicate, and search engines use speed as a signal of in your ranking, then you're going to want to render everything in advance. And the way to get those is to use a static site generator. That's what this data shows. Static site generators, they are written in fast languages like Rust and Go, and they are optimized to go as fast as possible to churn out, hundreds or thousands of pages in just a few seconds. And that's what this data says people are doing.
Awesome, thank you. And I believe you mentioned this in the presentation, but the next question is, what is the most popular CMS?
It depends. The most popular CMS at the enterprise scale is Contentful. But at the smaller end of the hobbyist and SMB end, Sanity has the edge. They're both very, very popular. They're both miles more popular than the next CMS, which is why they sort of go back and forth in the popularity stakes. But Contentful and Sanity are the two big leaders that we see right now.
Awesome. And then last question for you. So where can I learn more about building dynamic sites?
The most popular dynamic framework in the world right now is Next.js. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention Next.js as a place to go. Netlify docs have a lot of great support for all the ways that you can build Next.js on Netlify. So that is where I would send someone first.
Great. And that was our last question. Thank you everybody for joining us. We really appreciate you coming out and attending, and we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks at our next webinar on June 6th. Have a great day. Cheers.